Hi folks, Matt Easton here. In the forthcoming video, I subsequently had a conversation with Roland Vorcheka. So some of the views expressed in the video that you're about to watch, hopefully, are not precisely correct to Roland's interpretation. So the video that is about to come talks about this version of the handshake grip, where the lower fingers are almost gripping around the pommel and the index finger and thumb are up here. Some of you will have seen something looking very much like that on Roland's page called Dimicator, which is on Facebook. Now, what I hadn't understood was that, in fact, Roland proposes this as a terminus, as an end position for finishing a cut. So in actual fact, his starting position is something similar to what I suggest, or I propose as my current working theory. And actually this position that he shows in the kind of freeze frame is only an end position. So just to clarify that point, but hopefully once you've watched the video, which is just about to come, what I've just said will make more sense to you at that point. Hi folks, Matt Easton here. So a little bit more detail about my gripping method that I'm currently using with the Viking style or Viking era sword. And so essentially, to remind you guys, it's with my little finger at the bottom in that kind of hook at that junction, that T shape between the handle and the pommel. Okay, so I jam that in there, and what this allows then is, and also importantly, the other side of the pommel sits to the side of my palm. So you see, what I'm not doing is I'm not aligning my forearm with the grip so that it sticks in here. I'm actually sticking it there. Okay, so if I extend the sword, hopefully you can see that, the pommel actually comes up on the inside of my grip. Now, I'm very aware of the fact that Roland Vorcheka, who runs the Dimicator page on Facebook, has slightly differing opinions on how to grip this type of early Germanic or Dark Age sword hilt. And one variation that we've seen is the so-called handshake grip, a kind of extended or exaggerated version of it that looks somewhat like this. There we go. So holding the pommel and with the index finger and the thumb coming up here like you would grip a saber. Now, I'm not a fan of this for three main reasons. There are other reasons, but there are three main ones that I'll isolate. Firstly, and that is that this grip is only possibly shown in one or two historical images. The vast majority of historical artwork of this period, be it Anglo-Saxon or Frankish, shows, or Italian or whatever else, shows all of the fingers and the thumb being around the sword. Okay, there's very slight amount of evidence for this type of grip. So my first objection to it really is that the vast majority of historical artwork shows something that looks more like a conventional grip with all the fingers and thumb around the sword. Now, obviously artists weren't necessarily swordsmen, they weren't the experts on swordsmanship. However, when there is no real strong evidence for a certain type of grip, then it makes me a little bit suspicious. I'll just show a few examples now from Anglo-Saxon, 11th century Anglo-Saxon artwork showing the type of grip that we normally see in this kind of Dark Age, so usually 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th centuries manuscripts that show the grips we normally kind of see. You will also notice in the majority of artwork, whether you look at the Frank's casket or whether you look at the Stuttgart Psalter or whether you look at Anglo-Saxon sources or indeed the Bear Tapestry, then you will notice that the majority of the time swords are shown with a degree of angle between the forearm and the sword blade. They're not generally shown in this kind of pistol grip extended far out. That's not to say they're never shown that way. They are occasionally, especially on horseback, when someone, and this could be an artistic reason, when someone's reaching out from a horse to hit someone far away. But of course, in the artwork of this period, it's not always possible to show the distances realistically. And so if you've got a person on a horse here and you've got a person on foot here being hit, you need the person on the horse's sword and arm to reach the person on foot, and they have to do this, so they have to stretch the sword out. When they don't have that artistic constraint, when we look at people fighting on foot in front of each other, for example, usually there's an angle shown between the sword blade and the sword forearm, the sword arm, much like we see with Indian swordsmanship with the Tulwar style hilt. Now, I'm not saying that this type of Viking era or Dark Age sword was used in a draw cutting way like the Indian Tulwar was. I actually initially thought that that might be the case, but I no longer think that. I'll talk in more detail about that specific subject in a future video. So we covered my first objection is that the grip that is very much like a handshake grip like that, with the pommel almost in the hand and the finger and thumb open, is not really shown in historic artwork. That's my first objection. My second objection is that this is quite a weak grip. Okay, if we are in this period dealing with swords that are fairly weighty and that have a point of balance far from the hand, that is not very conducive, in my opinion, to holding the pommel instead of holding the grip and having the finger and thumb open. If you have the finger and thumb open, as I know very well from my sabre fencing experience, you can disarm a person fairly easily if you hit their blade at the right angle. That is with a light sabre, sabre like these ones up here, like that. Okay? If you can do it with a light sabre, you can certainly do it if they're holding a heavier sword like the Viking era sword with a point of balance far from the hand. So I don't think it's a secure enough grip, but that's my subjective opinion. Finally, the reason why I don't like this pommel holding extended handshake grip is that it doesn't explain why for over 6 centuries Germanic swords had a pommel that formed a T shape here. Okay? The problem is forming your opinion about how to grip a sword kind of working around the design rather than working with the design doesn't make much sense to me, archaeologically, scientifically, biomechanically. My opinion is that if you have a sword which has a very specific style of pommel, again, like we see with the Indian Tulwar, that should tell you something. That has been designed in a specific way to maximise a certain method of use. I don't believe that you would have a pommel which is essentially a bar going along here if you're intending the person to grip the pommel. In actual fact, we find that Brazil nut pommels and wheel pommels are more comfortable to put in the hand and grip than a bar is. And especially this, I mean, this is a fairly constrained shape on this example I've got here, the Clontarf. Many Viking era hilts are a lot longer bars here. Now, if you've got a very long bar there, it doesn't make sense to be trying to grip the pommel in the palm of the hand. It just doesn't fit comfortably into the palm of the hand. But equally, even if you can squeeze it into the palm of your hand, like I just about can with this sword, what am I gaining from it? I'm not gaining anything from having a pommel that is a T-junction. If they designed a pommel that was a T-junction, it must be there as a T-junction for a specific reason. Okay? And it's not, as far as I'm concerned, to go into the palm of the hand. Then you would have a different shape, more like a round shape or a wheel pommel or a ball or something like this that comfortably fits into the palm of the hand, not a bar. Okay, so that's where my theory of the essentially leverage point or hook at the bottom of the grip comes into play. Because now, if we're swinging the sword with that little finger retaining at the back end of the sword, then suddenly it makes sense. It makes sense why we have a pommel that is a bar, because it's there to go against your little finger and retain the sword, especially with a weapon that has a point of balance very often quite far from the hand. If you look at early migration era swords, like I looked at in earlier videos recently with Paul Mortimer, then those type of swords, they handle almost like an axe, because the point of balance is so far from your hand, you need that bar there to retain that weapon in your grip. And finally, with that theory, we have a possible reason why we get this distinctive T-shape on Migration era and Viking era swords. So there we go, the three main reasons why I'm not a fan of this grip. Firstly, it doesn't really appear in artwork with any regularity or hardly at all. Secondly, it's a very insecure grip, because you've got open finger and thumb there. It's very easy to knock the sword out of the hand. And thirdly, because it doesn't explain why the pommel would be that shape. If the pommel is a T-shape, there must be a reason why it's a T-shape. And gripping it in the middle of your palm doesn't really make sense to me. Okay guys, cheers for watching!
Click subscribe now and also follow us on Facebook.